tell you what we'll do. Let's just start this off. So what this is intended to be is a gathering, select gathering of some senior people from tech, creative and cultural sectors, of course, backed by Barnsley Uni, our good long-term partners, great long-term partners, with a specific topic about how we in our sectors and our ways are responding to the pandemic. I mean, naturally, I'm sure we'll find ways of talking about what we've each done ourselves, but I'm really looking for other examples of creativity, whether it's from clients, perhaps colleagues and so on. Just clever things, because in these times we are, one way or another, we're all looking for change, leadership, guidance, insight, response essentially. And, to a greater or lesser extent, everyone is slightly rabbits in the headlights about what's happening. We're all living in some sort of eternal present where even the nuancing of furlough this or furlough that or lockdown or whatever, almost every day, there seems to be some different perspective, which is why a deeper seated role of creativity is yet more important. So let's, I'm going to ask Paul actually to kick off. I mean, by all means, of course, do talk about your business. In fact, I want to give you one sort of specific opportunity, which is you've been talking, and I know it's still fairly early stage, about the new premises you're in, potentially using those for other creatives subsequently, simply as a sort of a hangout area. Can you just explain your thinking on that and where you're up to on it?
Yeah, so we had an amazing place in Bradford-on-Avon. I have to say that because Tom is on my screen at the moment. And it was absolutely superb. And we moved into number 1 Savile Row in December, I think it was, which is a gorgeous 3-story, obviously Georgian building. And so we took the whole building on, and obviously COVID happened in March. It was like, oh bugger, we got the timing of that completely wrong, didn't we? So we were stuck in the contract for 8 years, but that was by the by. But no, finding good office space in central Bath is really hard anyway. But we didn't want to let it go. So there was never a conversation about, okay, well, can we get out of the contract? Because the reality is the situation is not going to last forever. And we're going to need the space, sooner rather than later. But we do have space. We're a 10-person agency. We don't use all the space. The space was taken on deliberately to help our expansion without having to relocate again. So we do have room for quite comfortably for about another 8 or 10 people who could go into one of the floors upstairs. So we just kind of thought, well, the reality is that there's office space in centre of Bath is not the best. It's usually cramped. I know they're going to have difficulties with honouring the social distancing. And we thought, well, there are a couple of rooms that we kind of use as breakout rooms at the moment. But, we do have a little bit of capacity. And we just thought, well, actually, do you know what? There are creatives out there, designers, techie people, PR people, writers, whatever, and they're not getting the opportunity to take on space for themselves. And there's normally a 3 or 6 month contract that they need. And the reality is, because of the way things are, that's a big commitment. I used to be a freelancer years ago. It's a big commitment to fall.
But just on a practical point, how does it work, or might it work from individuals' point of view about their own safety in your environment, and your point of view about having people coming in, coming out, and so on? These are tougher times for any form of social distancing and cleanliness, COVID-free, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have left it open for our team to come in for a maximum of 2 days per week until all this blows over, and that's usually on a Tuesday and a Wednesday.
Do you typically arrange it so that everyone's in at the same time?
Ideally, yeah. It's just so that we can have internal meetings and brainstorming sessions and stuff. And the rest of the time they work they're working from home at the moment. So we figured, well, actually, that's realistically, 3 days a week whereby space in the office is not actually being used. we still have the cleaners going in every week to make sure it's completely scrubbed down all the time. So it seemed a little bit of a waste leaving the building empty. It's a big old building. We've got no issue with the social distancing in there anyway, because it's quite spacious. The desks are massive, absolutely massive. So that alone gives you the meter and a bit anyway. So we just thought it could work. It could work. So why not just start putting it out there and give people that option? That we'll always make sure there's one person in the office who can let people in, let them out, or whatever. But they've got free reign of the place and free coffee as well, which ain't a bad deal, So it's not too bad. But it's a nice space. It's a nice space, and I know it's something that I would have if I was still a freelancer. I was a freelancer during the last recession. And if there was an option there for me to do something like that, then I would have taken it up. And I know it's difficult. I worked from home for 7 years, and it's really testing and challenging. So if it gives people an opportunity while coffee shops and everything like that are shut, then go out for a few hours. They get access to to a nice work environment as well. And there's some nice breakout areas for them that they can just relax in, and there's always going to be at least one other person there anyway. So it could be.
It certainly sounds really interesting. We'll come back to the business iterations that we're all facing. I just want to ask this point about creative use of space, that one way or another, as Paul's articulated, with the limitations on opening up offices, which we're meant to be all working from home whenever, wherever we can. But also with the need to get teams together. I'm wondering if other people are finding either directly in their business or business area, or they know of other people who are using space creatively. Dan, for example, Dan Fallon, I think, I don't know where you're up to on your particular odyssey around Bath. You seem to have been in various places in Bath over the years.
We're in limbo at the moment.
You're in limbo. Where's limbo? Don't know that one.
Where is limbo? Limbo for weird American film. We're not in where our lease expires in Royal Mead, along with everyone else's leases in Royal Mead at the end of March. So we're out of there. Whether or not we get back in there before lockdown ends, before COVID ends, don't know. But we're kind of betting that we won't. The plan when we finish is to get a smaller and more luxurious space. So what we're calling a clubhouse. For ourselves. Don't know where it will be. We've been through, for the last 9 months, we've kind of been it's been slightly remarkable how well we've managed without space. I thought the teams would fall apart, there would be lack of cohesion, I thought everyone would get very depressed, and that people wouldn't get work done. In actual fact, it's worked really, really well, but I can't believe that'll continue for much longer. I constantly think it needs sorting out. So we've done all sorts of efforts to get people back together, which have now been stymied by lockdown 2.0. So that's where we are. We're sort of suffering through this one, and then we'll review again in January as to how we're going to limp through the remaining few months until the world opens up again.
Could you give some sort of sense of scale when you say a clubhouse? Roughly how many people work at Searchstar at the moment, and what sort of capacity might the clubhouse be? What roughly?
So I think at the moment we have a space that's a bit big for our team. So we've got about 65 staff, and I think our current office, if everyone decided to sit at their beige desks in rows, takes about 80. And historically we've run very traditionally in that way. I think the new space, I would be surprised if it has more than about 30 or 40 desks.
Right, so a little over half, something like that.
I think we're aiming for the brief is half the space and double the quality, and make it really sexy. And
net to the business, very roughly, how do the maths of that or the finances of work? If it's twice the space, half the space, it's cheaper, but twice the quality is that more than the space?
No, I mean my bet is that the office market is going to be fairly wide open next spring. So I think we'll get half the space for half the price. And yes, we may have to, and if we sign up for a proper lease on it, we'll get some sort of rent-free deal, which will allow us to pump 50,000 quid into making it look pretty.
Okay. Alison, from a bid perspective, and not just the creative and tech sector, but slightly more broadly, what do you hear about office space and this sort of clever reworking, as Paul's been talking about, or reusing an existing space?
Sorry, to be honest, I'm not hearing masses about. I mean, we're hearing that they're not there. We know they're not there. People in the larger office spaces who would be members of the bid. I'm hearing it more from the agent's perspective, I guess. We talk to agents and landlords. The chair of the bid is the chief exec of St. John's. So obviously there's a healthy kind of behind the scenes commercial property chatting going on, and I think they're very aware, like you say, Daniel, that the office market is going to be wide open because everybody is reconsidering their spaces, and if there's an opportunity to reconfigure because of your lease terms, then I think people will. But that's just my reading of the market, really, and I think it'd be quite interesting to see how it plays out on Bath Quays, which has always been this very confident move for new office space on the basis that we're short of kind of what you're describing, Daniel, really, this sort of funky office space. It's quite easy to find an empty lawyerish Georgian building with lots of small areas, but that doesn't really lend itself to the way in which I understand that your creative tech companies work, with lots of collaboration and inspiration within the office space. So I think you're right. I think it's all shifting massively, but I also think there's a lot of people sitting on their hands waiting to see what happens. But I haven't heard of anybody doing anything particularly marvelously clever with their office space. I mean, there's a bit of reuse of retail space. There's been a lot of reconfiguring of stores to make it COVID safe. People have been much more flexible about their store layout than I've ever seen before. But and obviously there's been a bit of creative reuse of empty shop windows, which is something. Doesn't resolve the fact that the shops are empty, but at least it looks a bit more jolly as you walk past an empty shop.
Tarts them up a bit.
Pardon?
Tarts them up a bit, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. And it's, everybody when you talk about the high street, everybody says it's got to have an active ground floor frontage. So I guess balloons and superheroes is active. And it's creating an outlet for people like the carnival creative teams who can't run carnivals. So
I was going to say, it sounds like an entree to clever creative businesses to say, come on, look, we can help design this sort of pop-up shop or whatever in a way which adds to the gaiety of nations, or at least the look of Milsom Street, if not like the gaiety of nations.
Yeah, but that's very much the way that it's been approached. But that's one of the, I'm here really with a listening brief. I'm interested to hear because I'm not hearing so much from the office sector because a lot of people are absent. I was hoping to kind of gain some more understanding really from the spout. But
let's shift in sort of parallel to one of the biggest occupiers of space in the city is Bath Spa Uni. Clearly you've got massive duty of care issues. There's a government pronouncement today about the 6-day window in which students will be allowed or permitted or whatever to go back to their hometowns and so on. And is there any opportunity, need, or availability from Bath Spa's point of view to use any of its space differently in these times?
Well, Bath Spa's done pretty well with COVID in that we haven't had a big outbreak with our students, which we're grateful for, and we've continued to do blended online and in-person teaching. But I think that the shake-up around space will affect HE in the way that it is everywhere else. I think it'll probably take a bit longer for it to play out in the university sector. But one thing I did want to say is that our town centre space, studio at Palace Yard Mews, where we have 23 resident micro businesses, it's been really interesting. It was very interesting while we were open, seeing how important that space was to people in terms of being able to come together. In terms of being able to, purposefully be together in a space when you want to be together in a space in order to do the work that, as lovely as it is to see you all in your boxes, there are certain types of work that just work better in person. But one thing we are doing in the short term is we're going to commission a piece of research looking at the idea of hybrid hubs, by which I mean physical spaces where you work online as well. So the kind of intersection between online and physical communities and how people use space. So in collaboration with the Pervasive Media Studio in Watershed in Bristol and another creative tech hub in Exeter called Collider, we're going to commission a piece of research that looks at kind of the future of hybrid spaces. So we'll be back in touch when we've got that.
What is a sort of sensible timescale on that this research piece?
Well, the research is coming out of the Southwest Creative Technology Network, and our funding for that project ends at the end of March. Believe it or not, at the end of March, it'll be 3 years for that project.
Wow, that's
we're hoping for an additional 2 years of funding, which we'll find out about in January. But so it's soon we'll hopefully identify the researcher in December with the idea that the research will be done by the end of March at the latest.
Right. I mean, clearly, we'd obviously want to understand more about that to give some sort of platform to analyse it and to have contributors on that. But in the near term, there is no change. There's no either opportunity or perceived need to change the offering or the availability. A little bit like as Paul has talked, but obviously on a very different scale.
No, there's been some horse trading with Bath Uni in terms of Bath Spa moving out of some spaces and Bath Uni moving into them, and also that's happened across student accommodation as well. But I think really the current preoccupation of all universities is how to retain students in this terrible environment, because losing students is terrible for HE metrics. It's one of the main ways in which the government sets their terrible league tables for universities around.
Do you mean retention in the city subsequent to graduating? Or?
No, I mean students not dropping out.
Oh, I see. Oh,
yeah, I think that there could be a terrifying dropout rate as students, as we know, student mental health is a huge issue, and it was before coronavirus, and the virus is just really making it very difficult for, your average 20-year-old who has no money, who's stuck in a terrible student accommodation with terrible Wi-Fi trying to study online, just really, so the dropout rate is something, it's not happening yet, but it's a kind of terrifying precipice for the sector.
And Dan, without this is not meant snarkily, and you'll think, oh, that means it's meant snarkily. It's not. I've heard this observation made before. It absolutely applies to me in this room that more senior managers, people who run businesses and so on, tend to have the nicer houses, the better Wi-Fi, better desk facilities, whereas our more junior members, a little bit like Kate's students, there's not that much difference between a student in a bedsit and a junior working in a multi-occupancy house, cross-legged on their bed with crap Wi-Fi. How does that play out in terms of the, not literally just you, but you can talk about it if you want, in terms of teams working from home when they don't have the facilities that perhaps others of us do at home?
It's been quite interesting because I'm an extrovert and I'm quite gregarious, so I assumed everyone would want to talk to each other. We're probably about 50% of the agency have absolutely no desire they have good working arrangements at home, and they've got no desire whatsoever to come in and see their colleagues pretty much ever. And they're entirely happy. I mean, it's not 50%, but there's a larger proportion than I guessed. Then there are the gregarious people like me who just want to go in and meet people who enjoy it. And then I suppose we've got about 15% of the team have in some way substandard home environments. Either they live with parents and share bedrooms with their brothers, or who knows what goes on in their personal lives, but one way or the other, or they live with 9 other people in a house in Bristol. And those people have sort of put their hands up to say they need help. What we've actually done is we've rented a room in Spaces. So while we've closed the main office, we've actually bizarrely rented a room in Spaces, which we're allowing people, if they really need to go somewhere, they can go there. The other thing is we've signed up with an app called Dasana, which is some shared office app, which allows people to book a shared office space for 25 quid a day. I think it's about 25, 30 pounds a day. And they can go into, I think there's about 5 different shared offices in Bristol where they can book in off the app, say they'd like to be there from 9 till 5, they'd like a desk, please, and Dasana will book them a shared desk.
Dasana, is that D-I-S-A-N-N-A?
D-E-S-A-N-A. And we sign up to it corporately, so we guarantee it. We issue everyone with a login. And if they want to get a desk, they can get a desk. And in London, I think they've got about 50 shared office spaces that you can go into. The big people they haven't signed a deal with so far is Regis, who own Spaces. So in Bath, it doesn't really work because Spaces doesn't do it, and neither does the Guild. Neither of them accept Dasana. But so our Bristolians, we're offering an app. I don't think many people are using it, but it's kind of that way for those, because I did feel when we closed the office, there was a little hardcore who were in 3-4 days a week, just because they hated being at home. Being at home just didn't work for them.
Yeah. Can I ask a point, and it's for all of us. I mean, I'll explain our position after this. But for all of us, if the government stricture is if you can work from home, you must in current times, certainly this lockdown 2.0, how does that work when there is a business need or a team need to actually get together? Are you limiting or prompting people to work from home, or are you just simply saying, look, it's up to you?
In the new one, we're saying there is no business need to come in. From business need, they don't, but we're saying people can come into the shared spaces, or they can come into spaces if they're just coming in for a bit of company or to see their mates, or they've arranged with their mate, they'll both come in on the same day so they can hang out together for the day. That's not allowed. They need to actually, and they can call it themselves because we don't want to dig too deep into their personal circumstances. But if they need to get out of the house, then they can come in, and that's for them to call.
Right.
But we don't see a business need to come to. We don't see a business need that overrides Boris to say that you need to come in.
In this lockdown period.
This lockdown, yeah.
Not immediately prior. Tom or Nathan, any thoughts on that point about, as people owning running businesses, about how you're sort of running your teams, particularly in lockdown, in terms of coming into an office, being together, etc.?
So from our side of things, we exited our office just as lockdown 1 happened, which was by design. And actually we were about to sign a very large lease in Bath, which we didn't do. We're actually in the process of opening a new office in Bradford Navan again. Akin to with Dan, it's very much a smaller space than we're anticipating. And it will be a very nice space. So that was kind of the intention. We're still going full steam ahead with that. We should be moving in hopefully early next week, and we will open that office. The reason for that is slightly other way. So I think actually the business imperative. So can I work from home? Yes, I can. Is that stable and good for my mental health? After 9 months or 6 months, whatever it is, 7 months we've now been in this, no. And we've got members of our team who are on internet connections that are so poor, they are stressing because they can't do the work they need to do. And we have members of our team who don't see anyone else. So since lockdown, they've like seen 3 people, and so actually getting them into the office to have some connection. But also from a productivity point of view, we're just finding that actually, although we can work and we can work well, the kind of, you don't pick up on the issues, you don't pick up on the stress levels from people. We've had people in meltdowns over this period where they just can't cope anymore, and they're stuck in a bedroom trying to work and not really getting a chance to have any sense of escape from that. So we are going to open it. We're doing it in a socially distanced way, and kind of the aim is to just actually begin to bring people together if and people wish to do so. So our position is actually not mandating anyone coming in. We're just saying it's available in order for you to do that if you wish to do so, but it's on flexible terms. So there will never be the whole team in the office. It'll only be a certain number, and making sure that we can do that in the right way. But yeah, I think it's an odd one, because I personally, Wiltshire, where I'm based, kind of, there's very little happening, and I don't really understand if schools can open. I've got 2 children, they go to school every day, and we're going to pick them up every day. It's kind of, why can't I go in an office? It doesn't seem to make any difference to me in terms of that distinction. If they're spending all their time in school anyway, why do we all need to sit at home? It just doesn't look.
I guess at the margin, no law or governance actually makes much sense. There'll always be that friction point, that anomaly. But if Yeah, but I'll ask Tom first. Actually, what's been your approach, particularly during this lockdown 2?
The second one probably similar to what everyone else has said. Really, the one thing we've done is we've slightly, not the strict working times, but we've changed our working times slightly because it's dark in the morning and dark when you finish. And I was worried that no one was going. Some staff, especially with the developer brain type, don't go outside. So I gave people the option to start earlier or finish later and have a longer middle of the day, and then encourage them to go for a walk. And if not, encourage people to walk to work, which essentially meant walking around the block, obviously. but trying to do that thing where they go out, they leave, and then when they finish work, because some people were working too late, because they were just sat there and it's just easy to keep going, to sort of stop, go for a walk, and come back. So we just tried to be a bit flexible with the times we run things. So I think mental health was the main issue. Not there was any major issues, but could have been. And then I've said people can come in the office if they need to, a bit like Dan said, but we're obviously smaller, so it's easier for us just to do it in our office. So I'm in the office today just on my own, and other people are just coming on their own just to get a different space and just to get out and walk. So we've sort of tried to just be flexible really to what people want.
Yeah, and how about sort of navigating what, on the one hand, the government is saying, which is don't go in unless it's absolutely essential, and the other is some of the business need you talked about, but also the social need. I mean, do you find there's a tension point between those two?
There is a little bit, and everyone, as Nathan has said and Dan has said, they've both taken slightly different views on what essential means, and I think that's like you said, there's a bit of a grey area, and your team's best. And I think we've done some work with some creative agencies, and they've, like the sort of brandy types, they found it really hard because trying to do a creative meeting over video, it's quite hard. Whereas if we're doing like an audit, like a technical audit of a site, that's easy to do over video because you're not sort of bouncing off each other. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we're more fortunate that we can work remotely and it's less of an impact on what we do, I think. But ours is more a bit about like just well-being when we've made decisions.
And just from a Media Clash point of view, we've had kept the office open and kept it very limited to a certain number of people. There was a roster and so on. It's up to people to decide. We found that the occupancy was pretty low, and partly that's because, like many of us, some of our guys have quite a travel to work. So, why travel to work if you can do much the same work at home? They would have argued. But then in this lockdown 2.0, we took the decision. No, the office is essentially closed bar one activity, which will sound very old school, I'm sure, which is mailing out the copies of the new issues of the magazines to advertisers on Friday mornings. Other than that one activity, which logistically can't be done from home so readily, everything else is closed for this 4-week period. And who knows? We're all trying to take our own interpretation. That may be a slightly more hardcore view by comparison with others, but God knows. We're all trying to figure it out. I want to come on to a commercial first and then on to a more creative subsequently. Examples of how either your business areas or clients have responded creatively. What have been some of the things which have impressed you? There's a bit of what's become a cliche now about businesses pivoting, which is slightly overplayed as a term, but nonetheless clever ways of doing business in these times. Paul, perhaps start with you.
I think it's prompted a rethink among many clients, but also ourselves as well as a business. We saw an awful lot of companies. They tended to do one or two things. Clients rather than not companies. They either decided to go into self-isolation and containment mode, in the sense of let's just retract from doing anything visibly from a PR perspective or content perspective, which I think was the wrong thing to do, having gone through the last recession and seen what happened when brands did that. They didn't come out of it very well. Yeah. And then there are others who are just like, right, let's just carry on as if nothing's happening. So they're not reading the room in terms of how the mood has changed and how consumer purchasing decisions are being changed and affected. So some of them just weren't getting it at all, but there have been some, because we, like many creative agencies, particularly the PR sector was hit incredibly hard. And there was a stat out a few weeks ago saying that 45,000 out of the 85,000 people who were employed in the PR industry back in March have lost their jobs. So half the industry has been decimated. So it's been hit really, really hard. But what we're seeing is a lot of PR agencies who I've looked at for the last couple of years and thought, I love what they do, they're really, really good. They've just not adjusted at all. They've kind of gone with this, let's just wait and see what happens approach, and hopefully it'll all blow over and everything will all return to normal. It's like, behave. It ain't going to.
But have you changed how you've been operating? Have you either a point of emphasis in style or tone, or perhaps in offering? Has that changed?
Yeah, we have. So we defined our brand proposition a bit better than what we had done. It's like a gardener tends to have the worst garden. Well, we're a PR firm and we've never done PR for ourselves, which is quite ironic, really. So we started doing that, and my God, this stuff works. It really does. But it made a massive difference, and we actually won 14 projects over the lockdown, and 5 of those have now turned into 12-month contracts, which is fantastic. But that was because we introduced new services like doing video content, motion graphics, doing more kind of long form thought leadership sort of content as opposed to this short form sort of content that we have been doing for the previous 6 years or so. That made a massive difference. But also kind of, we commissioned a couple of pieces of market research, which involved over 1,000 respondents, and we took some of those findings. So one of them was on brand purpose and gaining an understanding as to how consumer attitudes are changing. And there's that realization of, bugger, we're actually not doing this for ourselves. We're telling and advising clients that they need to be focusing on, being more socially responsible, looking at sustainability initiatives, but we were banging the drum, but not actually living by it ourselves. So we're just finalizing our proposition, whereby as a business, we're now going to be committing to a certain percentage of every fee that we take is going to be redirected into a socially responsible or sustainability project. So it's showing up we're doing something better, and it also helps the clients because they know as standard, then a certain percentage of their fee is not going to be lining our pockets. It's actually going to be going to good causes. So hopefully it'll make them feel a bit better about the social impact that they're having. And this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the pandemic. So I think it was a good opportunity to just take a step back and actually look, how are we different to anybody else? Is there anything that we are doing that makes us stand out? And the reality is, actually, no, there wasn't. Yeah, we're bloody good at what we do, but so are so many other agencies as well. So we just needed something that was going to be a little bit different, offer a few more services that we haven't done before, and push those out. And they sort of collaborated and combined to be really effective for us. So the new services, for example, biggest cash cow at the moment.
Let me bring in Dan on this one. Has there's a phrase that the great pause has also been the great accelerator. That it's brought forward change which might have been apparent otherwise, but has come faster. And has SearchStar changed in these times in its business offering or approach?
We're on a change anyway, in that we're becoming a more international, multilingual. Whilst we're still looking after, whilst we're still working with what I call old SearchStar clients, we're on a journey towards working with more international, multilingual, often tech or B2B clients, which is part of our American parent are pushing our way. And I suppose the big move that COVID brought was March and April were financially disasters, and about 25% of our business was travel. So that vanished. Although I'm about to write a blog about how I hope it's going to come back in the next week, travel advertising. The people who saved us were our e-commerce clients, and they suddenly, sort of having panicked for a few weeks that it was impossible to socially distance warehouse workers, suddenly when they started getting tens of thousands of orders for garden furniture, they suddenly discovered that actually they could put people in their warehouses and fulfill the orders. So they've kept us, they've actually made up for all the business we've lost. So we've actually we've done respectively. In terms of actually how our businesses, I think we had a strategy that we were quite comfortable with anyway. The client mix has shifted. We've still got to, the big shift we haven't worked out how to do is take on trainees and grads.
Yeah.
You know, we as part of lockdown, the people we put on furlough were all the juniors, and we kept on the seniors. And then we realised we needed sort of a lot of people back, so we brought as many people as we could back. And we're just going into recruitment now, and it's how we bring in juniors, because we need bodies. So
well,
we need to hire.
Let me at this point perhaps bring in Louisa. It seems somewhat apposite that you know, part of our with Credit Bath, our relationship with Bath Uni has been helping or trying to help provide those pathways to employment, awareness of businesses, and so on. Louisa, if you could talk about the slightly more general position, and then come to a specific about how something might work with a business such as SearchStar. What has it been like in terms of trying to help students find those routes to employment, and what would you want from the creative and tech sector in Bath to help you further in these times?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Greg. Just to say, by the way, because I don't know many of you, it'd be really useful if people could say their companies when they start talking. Just I don't know if others are new here, but that would be really helpful. But
apologies. Actually, if I could ask all of you, whilst Louise is just saying a couple of words, if you click on your screen, you can rename yourself, as I did halfway through, and just put your company name next to it.
Okay, thank you. That's really useful. So yeah, so it was a shift, obviously, to virtual, and that happened, you know, as quick as we could do it in terms of. So I'm based in the careers team at Bath Spa, with an external facing role, and as quickly as we could, all placements and internships went virtual. So we had a virtual internship scheme that's up and running again. There may be more opportunity to get involved with that now, and then it will run again in the spring. I noticed there isn't the chat function on here, but I was going to share a document with all our placement schemes. What I'll do, Greg, if I send that to you, perhaps you could send it out to the group.
We will, yeah.
So that's sort of short-term internship opportunities. There's also placements that are up to sort of 10 weeks. We've got 70-hour open module placements, and then professional placement years. So basically all of those offers where students of you know, second and third year students and graduates would be getting their work experience, making their connections and getting out into industry. It's all had to be obviously virtual for the time being, and then back to virtual now if anyone had been able to get out into the sort of physicality. So everything shifted to that, which on one hand makes it much more flexible. So we've seen lots of different roles. We've had a focus on supporting third sector and SME. So those virtual internships, they were fully funded. So we paid the student, and that meant that we were trying to link them with need. So those small businesses and charities and what have you that had a real need, especially during lockdown. Some of the other schemes are then part funded, so we're still supporting organisations to take people on. And then either the professional placement year or for graduates, and this might link with Dan talking about taking on graduates, we've got something called the Grad Talent Development Agency, which is a free service, and it's all about retention really. So keeping students who are from the Southwest in the Southwest, and that's not just Bath Spa students, it's also any student from the Southwest, but the agency is run from Bath Spa. It's a partnership between University of Bath, Bath Spa, Bath College, and then the Swindon and Wiltshire LEP. So it's a regional project, and that's about retention. It's about sort of WP characteristics, so widening participation, supporting graduates to stay in the Southwest and work with SMEs. And I don't know if SME does relate to members of this group, but certainly there's support there that we could work with you through.
And has there been, you know, these are difficult times for everyone, and in some respects it's more difficult for students than for almost any other sort of cohort. Been any reluctance on the part of students to take part in virtual internships because you cannot, as has been touched on, you can't have quite the same softer social engagement with people if you're popping up on a screen for half an hour for some sort of planned meeting, as distinct from being in a place of work and just, you know, absorbing it all by osmosis.
Yeah, it's probably hard to tell. I mean, overall applications are probably up, so I'd say it's the opposite of reluctance, but it might be different students. That's what's interesting. You know, it might be tapping into those that we didn't reach before. I feel there's a sense, it's the same with the events we run. We would have been doing, you know, workshops and career sessions and bringing employers in to talk to students, and all that's obviously online, and actually numbers and engagement is higher. And I feel like there's an accessibility situation that's been helped because of it being virtual. So those that couldn't, you know, get out and have fixed time. So there's a flexibility through virtual working. It might, you know, it requires the student to have good Wi-Fi and their, you know, laptop suitable, etc., and have a decent place to work from. So others we might be missing that are falling through the gaps. But some of the big ways we're trying to support students, particularly, so my area is you know, creative industries for students, and we've got a mentoring scheme, which again I'll pass on details. So students can connect, that's actually any sector, connect with industry. But also we're trying to find ways to profile and give exposure to our creative graduates. And one thing that was said earlier by Alison, or we sort of touched on, was shop windows and the idea that work could be showed, or even we're talking about performance, because the performers are the ones that are most concerned. They don't have places to perform. And so we were talking about, you know, it would be mime, or maybe there'd be music played, but there could be theatrical or certain performances in empty spaces. Might be a really nice thing to look
Well,
at.
if there is a potential for a productive conversation, Alison and Louisa, please have that, because you know, on the one hand, there's empty space which actually doesn't make the overall sort of topography of Bath look that good. On the other, there's students who need experience, exposure, whatever, that basically. But you know, that's obvious, I guess. Let's hope something comes up. Can I come back to Nathan and then Tom about the business and how, sorry, Louisa, thank you, I didn't say that. To Nathan and Tom about how your business has changed. I know, Nathan, you've had a very different change, which is you've rebranded in the middle of a pandemic, but which is fascinating in its own right. In terms of your business offering or approach to business, how has that changed?
Yeah, I guess a bit like Paul, we never do what we do to our clients, to ourselves. So our previous company name, Ojo, was brought up in a pub in 5 minutes. So there wasn't much thinking behind why it existed and what the name meant to us. So we started a process last year, very much wanted to carry that on during lockdown and accelerate it. We felt that if there was one thing that we should do is come out of lockdown clear and understand kind of how we're looking to take forward. We were hoping to have relaunched in the summer, but with client commitments and other things, we weren't able to quite hit that. So we launched in late September, and just ironically, just launched our new website last week, despite lockdown. But it was very much about making sure that we're clear about why we exist and how we help. And for us, actually, there's kind of two bits. All our business mainly comes from face-to-face activity. We would be at conferences, talking to people, networking. You know, that's where we thrive, understanding what people's problems are and how technology can help them. That's disappeared. So for us, it was actually our website, which was just a very simple brochure site to just say we exist and this is the sort of stuff we do, became suddenly a really important channel. So now all our direction and travel is on digital and digital marketing and that side of things in order to support our work and making sure that we can balance that. Likewise, carrying on delivering more virtual events. So in November, we're part of a very large charity event, and it's kind of it's doing things in very different ways. It's changing that narrative and changing kind of how we help. At the same time, keep doing what we do, and I think that was really important for us. You know, at the beginning of lockdown 1, it was kind of, well, no one's buying, and there's nothing out there, so no point trying to sell. But we do a lot in the not-for-profit sector, so it was kind of, for us, was making sure that the people that we do work with, the charities we work with, we could help them, and those that were already in processes, it was helping them to go faster, to help them to get to where they needed to be, and we've seen quite a lot of that, and doing that in the right way. So we still do a lot where we support and we invest in those charities to make them get to where they need to be. So we're working with a mental health charity, Charlie Waller, which I'd highly recommend for those particular universities because they support very much the graduate space, and getting their information and advice. And for them, it was a huge pivot. They literally, their entire business was based on face-to-face training. That went on day 1, and now they had to do that completely in a digital way. So for us, it was helping them to get to that sort of position faster. So a lot of our work has been the shift from physical first to digital first, and helping clients to make that transition and what does that really mean for them. And I think that hybrid world that you mentioned, Kate, I think is a really interesting one. You know, we go back into offices, we live in a world where at the moment everything's boxes on screen. Suddenly we're going to be in a world where some of us are going to be together and some of us aren't going to be together because we're going to be still at home. And it's a bit like the old home working in the office dilemma that people have and feel like they didn't get into the banter at the coffee machine because they weren't in on that day. We're going to have that us and them type culture. And I think it's going to be really interesting how that evolves as we come out of whatever reality looks like in 2021. And I think that's really interesting for all businesses and how they operate.
Yeah.
But that's been a big shift for us, and just getting ourselves aligned to do that. So I'd say been working with Dan from SearchStar as well to kind of progress some of those things and and pivot. We've never done any of that sort of work before, and it was kind of really important to get that going and working the right way.
Yeah, the risk of ever so slightly clutching at straws. I suppose one of the things that's come out frankly for all of us, both sort of personally and probably professionally, is the need to learn and to try and to experience and to test and to pivot. I'll say it, but it's you're prompted into new directions. You think, shit, if this is where I am now, what do I now do? And actually, at a slightly deeper level, that I've personally found that really interesting because you're forced to think in a different way, which is no bad thing. Tom, from your point of view, I'm sure you'll concur with much of what's been said about how emphasis of businesses have changed. Anything additional, specific from you?
No, it's really interesting actually hear everyone's stories, just because they're all similar. As Dan said, we had a few clients panic who were e-commerce. They should have been fine that we were doing SEO for. And they just rang up and said, I'm presuming you're furloughing all your staff, so we're just stopping everything type thing. And we're like, no. But then as soon as sales come in, they were then trying to increase stuff. No, we're fortunate that we're not particularly massively in the travel and hospitality sector, which isn't by skill or design, it's just by complete fluke. So a lot of our clients that were thinking about doing stuff like that just sped up what they wanted to do, I think, because they've realized they need to. So I think for us, lead times have got shorter. So we've had to be better at turning projects around and be more efficient, I think, because before people would chat about it for a couple of months, then you book it in. Whereas now, if they decide they want to do it, they want to see a result pretty quick. So we've had to somehow be quicker. So for us, it's been how we work in teams. So we've worked slightly differently in slightly smaller teams because that seems to be more efficient remotely.
I want to come on to, as we come to the close of this, some deeper points about creativity in these times. There's a phrase which I should have sourced. I think it was Shelley who said this, that poets write the first draft of history. And it's a slightly portentous way to skew into this other point, which is equally a bit portentous. It's a quote from The Third Man that Graham Greene and I think Orson Welles wrote this part of it. I want to come to this point about how at a deeper level creativity can rise. So the quote is, in Italy for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder and bloodshed, but they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love, they had 500 years of democracy and peace. What did that produce? The cuckoo clock. So in other words, out of chaos and war and terror and death and everything else, and to the extent we're experiencing it, deeper art and creativity can flourish, and almost as a direct response to it. Do you buy that as an argument? Perhaps one of our Bath by Uni contributors, perhaps. Or not?
I guess I don't really buy that. Not that I'm Swiss or anything, but I think
it wasn't an anti-Swiss point. It was a point.
No, I know that, Greg.
Where you change the equilibrium, then weird things happen.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I just feel that it's been such a hard time for so many people that, and a lot of artists that I know, a lot of freelancers who work across the creative sector have just lost their livelihoods completely. So from my perspective currently, I find it hard to see it as a time of great flowering, but also I think your first quote holds true as well, in that we need to be 10 years down the line before we can can really see what's happening. I do think though that things will recover quite quickly once we're able to recover. I do feel optimistic about that, and about people's ability to bounce back and find creative solutions, because that's what innovation is, isn't it? It's people create problems and then they find ways to solve them. So I think that there will be, once we're able to move out of this current situation, there will be a real speeding up of innovation and people really wanting to get things done.
To switch that, is it, you're not quite saying this, but is it because people are in something approaching a survival mode or a short-term mode that there's almost the headspace for that degree of innovation or creativity? Fair?
Yeah, and so many people I know have, childcare issues, caring issues. There's people just are really carrying a heavy weight at the moment. So that's my feeling.
So I was going to say, I find it really interesting that at the moment we've kind of, in lockdown 1, it was very much a kind of survival kind of flight type position. We're in a second wave. Some people have, as we went into the summer, bounced back out of that and have had that opportunity to thrive and flourish, and others haven't. So there's kind of that space where there's the have-gots and the have-nots, and there's a whole bunch of people in the middle that are kind of left in a quandary of we don't know. You saw that all the people that sort of left on furlough and had no idea if they were ever coming back or not. And those in, obviously in the hospitality industry where, still not being able to reopen, and what does that look like? And I think what I've noticed is that, there is that degree of creativity. It's been amazing to see the innovation that's come from the need to deal with a problem in front of us. That crisis drives some of that. But at the same time, as soon as we came out of lockdown 1, it was like, we just all went back to normal. I recall driving down to visit my mum in South Devon when we could. We were in a social bubble, so I went down quite early on, and it was like driving in midnight. There was no one on the motorway. A week later, I went down again, and it was traffic jams. I was just kind of, wow, what's happened? and we don't seem to have kind of learned. And my worry would be that we come out of this and we just go back to what we were doing as soon as we can. We're bored of being at home now. The fun of that and what that means of being in these spaces is kind of, we thrive the thing that we used to have. And so go back into that space, go into mass consumption, go and kind of run off and do things that we want to do rather than necessarily learn and change. So I think it's going to be interesting whether will we as a country and as businesses change our views on the world? Will we become more purposeful? Will we be thinking about the environment more? Will we change the way that we really operate, or will we just find ourselves slipping back into what was?
That's a great, if not a pivot, a slight turn into the last part I was going to ask about, which is, what of the thinking now will endure? Paul, you talked about a research piece you did, and it's into this area of a sense of purpose. Do we? I suspect we all want to believe that there will be those sort of positive changes, the sense of, I don't know, provenance or buying local or thoughtfulness, a sense of purpose and so on. Do we actually think that those sort of values and approach will endure whenever something approaching normal happens in 2021?
Oh, there's the question. I genuinely think it will, yeah, because I think the fallout from the situation is not going to disappear anytime soon. And I think we're going to be feeling the effects and impact of it for at least another 2 years or so, not in terms of recurring lockdowns or whatever, but it is going to have to change. And I think we saw this in the first few weeks of the lockdown when the number of cases weren't necessarily particularly high, but you had social media influencers, for example. There was a significant backlash against them because all the stuff they were putting out there was just a very clear disconnect between the reality of everybody's life and what's happening and the fakery of what they were trying to put out there. And people were just like, oh, seriously, just go away. You're not getting what's happening, are you? And I think there is an intention. Business leaders, certainly in the research that we did and other research that I've been looking at over the last few months since we did ours, it's all echoing the same thing, that there is a change in mindset, a shift in the mindset that is likely to endure. I think it has been a phenomenally interesting period, a phenomenally interesting time. And I think as agency leaders, from my perspective, has been incredibly exciting, because you always see people will react and respond when the pressure is on them in either a positive way or in a terrible way. They just completely flounder. But I've seen your point about the whole creativity side of things. People have become more creative, more forthright with their ideas and thinking, because they recognize that we can't carry on doing what we've always done, because things have changed and that's not going to work anymore. So we have to continually be thinking of new approaches and new ways. And I think our challenge moving forward is going to be, well, how do we continue to untap that potential thinking within teams, and not at a time when it's because they're under pressure because of the circumstances in which we're in. And I think that will resonate with other organizations and different industry sectors as well. But I do think there will be that focus on the brand purpose, social led purpose. I'm not going to say it's going to dominate their thinking, but it's going to be something that can't be ignored, much like we saw with the Black Lives Matters. We work with a couple of diversity and inclusion clients. Diversity and inclusion has actually fallen away over the last 12 months or so. But things like this have reminded people that it can't go away, but it's made a massive appeal. And that, again, is shifting actions that businesses are taking. So there's a lot of change for good.
In a sense, what you're touching on there is back to this point about the great pause is also the great accelerator, is authenticity. That increasingly that's important, whether it's for brands, whether it's for organizations. Dare I even say personally that we've all been sort of, our humanity has been sort of defined by what is in the back of our screens right now. And we have a different form of intimacy because we can see to some extent, maybe not in Nathan's case, but to some extent, people's sort of personal topography in a way that otherwise we would only typically meet either in a neutral place like a cafe or in a defined space like an office, which is a dressed, created environment. And, this isn't, for what that's worth, and, what we're wearing and doing. But I want one last question, really, which is, it's horribly open-ended, but it's for the Bath Spa Uni people here today. Can students retain their idealism, which has been a characteristic of students for centuries? Can that idealism be maintained and even encouraged in these times, given the travails that they face, immediate to do with the pandemic, near term to do with economics?
Well, Miriam down there in the corner is actually a PhD student, so maybe that's one for her.
Miriam, sorry, Miriam, that's it, yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for this event today. I really enjoyed it. So I'm a PhD researcher. At the same time, I teach business environment module for the level 4 students since last year. So with my students, I found that they more enjoy being face-to-face. So we do blended learning. Some of them attend classes, some of them at the same time are from the computer. So I find it a little bit, sometimes they find it a little bit awkward because the online students tend to be shy. They don't like joining the discussions and events. But I realized that if students are feeling safe, if any of their roommates or housemates aren't tested positive, they tend we are on week 6 this week, and the same students tend to attend face-to-face since the beginning of the term. But if someone close to them tested positive, then they suddenly email me and they stay at home for that week. But I think from the students' perspective, they can retain this idealism because, of course, now we are on 10th month, so we survived in the first one since March. Probably by that time, our university students were college students, but they are in more like grown up, more mature now. So I think the students are coping better with this second lockdown compared to the first one, because all their lecturers, we are always telling them that they need to be strong, and this is a good opportunity for them to attend online lectures and face-to-face lectures at the same time. it's new for all of us, but I think from students' perspective, it's a bit easier. But at the same time, some of them has got difficulties. For example, my husband is lecturer as well, and one of his students 2 weeks ago emailed him, I committed suicide last night and I can't attend the lecture tomorrow. And we were just panicking and trying to understand what's going on. Then obviously we referred to well-being services, but as I said, like it's two-way. So for some students, yes, but for some not. It really depends on their psychology and the environment they are in.
Well, I thank you for that, Miriam. I think we're going to have to close now because we're through the hour. Just in closing, first up, of course, thanks for your time this morning. I hope you found it stimulating. I certainly have. I think, you know, this time has brought out, amongst many things, the fact that we can all learn from each other. And that's always been the case. We're all mimetic creatures. We all, you know, dare I say, language is a virus, and so are many other attributes. And it's an unfortunate metaphor, perhaps. But we all learn from each other, and I think this sense of coming together and just sharing experiences, you know, is useful in its own right. The other thing that's come through for me is the, if not unalloyed positivity, a belief that there are different ways of doing business which we've all had to learn and communicate and all else that goes with it, some at least of which will endure and change the way that we will be operating in 2021. To all of you, thank you for your support for Creative Bath, and have a bloody good day.
Thank you, Greg. Well done for hosting.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Greg. Bye.
Bye-bye.
But thank you.
Bye-bye.